Ready when you are.
All right, I'm ready. All right, I did my speech on Nelson Mandela, who was a great president, great leader of our time, not only for the country of South Africa, but a leader of in the world. When you talk about leaders, you talk about Martin Luther King, you talk about Barack Obama, you talk about FDR, John Kennedy, you talk about all these different leaders, and then you can't help but mention Nelson Mandela's name. Not only was he a loving father, husband, follower of Jesus Christ, leader, but was also, what stood out to me, a humble man, very humble man, a humble leader who dedicated his life to his country, even though he was behind bars for 27 years for standing up for what he believed in, and righteous and justice. And he went to jail for 27 years. In South Africa, their system, Congress, was already screwed up, didn't really have a foundation. So, him going to jail was really because of a crooked system. And back then it was dealing with segregation, much as our country was, but more so in South Africa. This is a picture of Nelson Mandela. This pretty much sums up his life. He was all for his country. All he wanted to do was do the best he could in either way. Even if he didn't become president, even if he didn't become that leader of that country, he always wanted to play a hand on making everything right for this country and for blacks and whites to also come together as one. Who is Nelson Mandela? Born Nelson Rolihlahla Yah. I had a difficult time pronouncing his middle name. He was also a revolutionary. He was an anti-apartheid, which was in his speech, his release speech. What he talked about more was getting away from these people, getting away from them, which were people who discriminated against black people and against the government and against everything that this country, South Africa, was trying to stand for. He was also a politician, of course, and philanthropist. The interesting thing about Nelson Mandela, while he was in jail, he got a BA degree from the University of London. So while he was in jail, he still got his degree. Who was Nelson Mandela? Also, he married 3 times. He has 2 sons and 5 girls. Also spent 27 years in prison, and as I talked about, he earned his BA in law from the University of London. Also awarded the Nobel Peace Prize jointly with the president at that time of South America. De Klerk was his last name. Context of speech, it was on February 11, 1990, the day of his release. That night before his release, he didn't really have a speech. He didn't have anything, but while he was in jail, he did write. He was allowed time to write. So with his time, he wrote speeches. He, listened to, while he was in jail, he got feedback from the rest of the country and the news about what was going on, and plus his people came in and out with telling him about issues and things like that. So before this, before this speech, he already had a mindset of what he wanted to do, of how he was going to help this country while he was in jail. And the book and the research that I did talks about it a little bit more in context. The speech was 20 minutes speech, a little bit over, but it was around 20 minutes, 25 minutes, but the gist of the speech was 20 minutes, so that's what I went based off on. President de Klerk was under extreme domestic and international pressure from different countries, including the United States, that led to Mandela's release. He was not to be released at all. So this was kind of a blessing in disguise, nothing but the grace of God that allowed, the president of South America to release him. And at the time, de Klerk did not want to lose his job or have to, go into, resign because of this issue. The country really wanted Mandela out, and it was a big issue. And for that country to move forward, Mandela had to be released at some point in time. Oh, what about the content? My favorite part in the speech was this: I have fought against white denomination, and I have fought against black denomination. I have cherished the ideal of the democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and equal opportunity. It is an ideal which I hope people to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. That's a bold statement. Like I said, he was all for his country. He was not selfish. He was a humble man, a great leader who would die for his country, for what he stood for, the right that he stood for. He believed that it was greater than him, that he would do the ultimate thing, which was die. And I kind of relate back to this, as how Jesus Christ was, who died on the cross for our sins. I kind of relate this to what he was saying. Now, he didn't actually die for his people, but he was putting it out there, and he lived by his words. So if he had to die by going out and protesting and doing what's right, and say if he got shot or something, but he died standing for what he believed and what the country needed to believe in. And which I believe is very, profound and bold statement for him to say this. Everybody can say something and write it down, but when it comes, down to that time, are you really about it? Can you really back it up? Or would you really, really do it in that situation? And I believe that Nelson Mandela meant what he said and all that he would do for his country. Memorable quotes of Nelson Mandela, not just in this speech, but in a lot of his speeches that he gave, not only as a president, but as a man, when he was young, just going around talking about different issues. First one, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. I'm pretty sure everybody, even Dr. Fieser would believe in that statement as being the educator and being someone who teaches, the future of this country. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time you fall. And that just shows, his life alone. He was put in jail for 27 years. He could have gave up. He could have just said, oh, this is a fight that we're never going to win. We're never going to get through this. There's nothing I can do while I'm in jail to help these people out. No, he carried his message out while he was in jail. He got it out to his people, and it just like a domino effect. It got to everybody, and everybody just believed that here's our hope. He was the hope for this country, and as many times as this country failed and was falling, he was that symbol of get up, continue. And for anybody, that you're going through anything in this life, you can look to this quote, and I look to it myself when I feel like I'm down, I feel like I failed. You got to get up. You have to go through adversity. You have to, fight through it. The third one, there is no passion to be found playing small in setting for life, but in less than the one you are capable of living. So, you have to live this life with passion. Set your goals and set your life to a certain standard, not small, but not too high, but just live a life that you want, but live with the purpose and live with the passion for something that you have passion for. And the last one, it always seems impossible until it's done. What Nelson Mandela did was considered impossible, not to a country, but to a world who was watching this country, and he made strides, and for 5 years he was the president. And being a president, there's the people say this, say that, but for the most part, he brought a country who was down and out and lifted them up. And today, their country, every country still has their issues and their problems. We have our issues and problems, but without him, the country wouldn't have made the strides that they're making today and are continuing to make. Anything is possible. Nothing is impossible if you put your mind to it, and you take the right strides to making that impossible become possible. But also it takes work, and it took him 27 years of hard work and his whole life dedicated to this country. What impact did it have? Joy and chaos. During this speech, it there was a lot of joy and chaos. It was still violence going on. It was still riots going on. But throughout this, he had joy and there was chaos. So he had a little bit of both, dealing with Nelson Mandela. One of the greatest speeches of all time, not just according to the book, but many sources, New York Times, New York Daily, CNN, not too long ago released their, greatest speeches of all time. Nelson Mandela had a lot of great speeches. And to me personally, this is a great speech. I believe, he had several other speeches that were better, but this is one speech that stood out because it set the tone for a country. It set the tone when he got out of what his plan was and what, as a nation, they needed to do together to end this crisis. Hope for South Africa and the world. Not just South Africa, it was the world. We're all going through discrimination still, racism. All these things are still upon us, but it was something that had to be done. And his speech gave hope not only to South Africa, but to the world. Nothing is impossible, like in my last slide. He preached this, and he continued to preach this throughout his whole life. Nothing is impossible. But, like I said, you have to, take the appropriate strides to making that impossible to a possible. It's not just going to be done overnight. It's not just going to be done in a day. Like that saying is, regards to this country, Rome wasn't built in one day. So what? That saying is, I'm not saying if I'm saying it right, but I know that, that's, when I think of that, I think of that saying. Right here is, on the day of his speech, these were in the headlines. These are different articles. As you can see, the big one is Mandela free, joy turns to chaos, cheers and hope. So there's a lot of mixed emotion with his, release. Not just from the white people, but blacks also didn't, seem that he needed to be released, which was interesting. But, it's just sometimes how it goes. But for the most part, for the better part, he was released, which had to be done. And it was just a lot of joy because, like I told you, he was the hope for this country. And for him to get out, and for the government of South Africa to be pushed to a certain degree to say, and we have to let him go, or this is or this is going to linger, and this is going to continue for years and years ago, for as long as he's in jail. He could have been in jail for 50 years. He had no timetable when he was going to get out for standing up for injustice. And that's just how cruel that government was. And it happens around the world. It's just in this case, he was such an important figure. And dealing with something like this, everybody who stands up for injustice and things like that is very important. Not saying they're going to end up the president of their country, but when you stand up for what you believe in, what's right, and what everybody as a whole knows what's right, should be released. Also, a little one right here, it said, sing a song of freedom. There's a lot of singing, a lot of Mandela praises, and like this one, TV welcomes Mandela at the jail door. So they were waiting for this. This was big. This was awesome. This was, to me, I compare it to when baby Jesus was born. Like everybody was waiting for him. The three wise men went to us and gave him gifts. Well, the whole country and the whole world were there to applaud him and to recognize his strength and his perseverance through 27 years in jail for something that, mostly the whole world knew that he shouldn't have been in jail for. And, the walks to freedom, the world rejoices. This was just an event of certain magnitude that just can't be described. My conclusion on Nelson Mandela is, if we could all be a little bit like Nelson Mandela, not only for what he stood for, because we all stand for something. We all stand for certain values and things like that. But Nelson Mandela, he was a man who was humble, who put himself aside. We all should at some point put ourselves aside and think about different people. And we could be selfish. There's nothing wrong with being selfish. We're human. You know, we have things that we want. But for him, he was so unselfish to the point where he was in jail for 27 years and didn't budge. And if he had to stand there a lifetime to prove that, you know, I'm going to stand with what I believe and what's right for this country, is something that, you know, just blows me away. And if we could all be a little bit more like him, I'm not saying, you know, go out there and, you stand for something and then go to jail. No, I'm not saying that, but, just saying, just look at his life. Try to look through the lens of his eyes, of what he stood for when he was alive. Looking back at his history, look what he did. Look at his early childhood, growing up, preaching. Just look at those things and I think, remain humble in whatever you do and whatever you stand for. Don't get too big-headed. Be humble about different things and, just put yourself, not always first, not always second, but sometimes third, fourth, put yourself last for the for the people, for people that you love and people that you care for.